Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Zoraida Hidalgo was briskly crossing the road, holding a bag and an iron can. She squinted and looked ahead. Zoraida hoped that she would be the first today. When she looked closer, she clicked her tongue in annoyance. "They beat me to it again," she grumbled. After a couple of minutes, she reached the desired spot. There was already a small crowd gathered. Vitalia looked triumphantly at Zoraida. As the woman approached, Vitalia smirked and said, "Not the first today, are you, Zoraida? It seems like you're losing your touch, dear neighbor." Zoraida gave her neighbor a contemptuous glance. "I wasn't in a hurry today, Vitalia, so you can hold back your smugness." Vitalia laughed. "Well then, don't be upset later if you end up with nothing. What I won't have today will be mine next time. And anyway, you don't need to worry about me. I have everything I need, really. I just came for no reason." Saying this, Zoraida turned away to avoid any more conversation with the annoying neighbor. There was a sound. All the neighbors turned towards the house. An elderly man came out to meet them. It was Nicolau Para. They had all come to him. Nicolau always helped everyone in the village. Vitalia put on a sickly sweet smile and approached the fence. "Nicolau, my dear, how's your health?" Her voice was overly sweet, as if she wanted to appease the old man. Nicolau approached the fence closely, his gaze scanning everyone present. He said nothing. After looking at each person, he opened the gate and let them in. Vitalia hurried ahead. Today, she was first in line, so she hoped to take the best of everything, although all of Nicolao's products were good. Zoraida entered the yard last. She lingered near Nicolau. "Hey, Nicolau. Was David at your place today?" Nicolau nodded slightly after closely observing the woman. She sighed and said, "That's good, because he came earlier than usual today. I asked him if he was at your place, and he told me you let him go early. And his eyes were so sly, as if he's deceiving me. So I thought he didn't go to you at all. Did you really let him go early?" The old man nodded once more. Zoraida sighed. "Don't give him any leniency. Let him work. The more he works, the less time he'll waste on foolish things. He's always running around on his dates with Alba. God, what a thoughtless girl." Nicolau stared intently at Zoraida. He didn't let David go early today. David worked harder than usual today. He told Nicolau that he wanted to go on a date with a girl, so he asked to be let go early. Nicolau let him go. He wasn't concerned about what he told his mother. David had done his work and had the right to free time. There was a noise. Zoraida and Nicolau looked towards the house. They saw Vitalia waving her hands, pushing Eleonora away. "I told you, I came first. Don't interfere. First me, then Basilio, and only then you," Vitalia shouted. "Oh, who needs you? Choose your things quietly, and don't bother me. Am I supposed to stand aside while you look through everything? We'll be standing here until night at this rate," Eleonora retorted, pushing Vitalia aside. Nicolau, frowning, watched the woman's outburst. He strode towards them. When he reached them, he glared sternly at both, and the neighbors immediately fell silent. Vitalia hurriedly gathered items from the table, while Eleonora stepped aside to get out of Vitalia's sight. "Forgive us, Nicolau. It's probably too hot in the sun today, and we could have a sunstroke. I'll take 2 dozen eggs, 2 kilograms of meat, 3 kilograms of tomatoes, and a chicken carcass. Could you tally that up for me, dear Nicolau?" Vitalia politely asked. Nicolau was sitting on a stool next to the table. He pulled out a worn notebook and a pen from his pocket. After moistening his fingers, he opened the notebook and wrote something down. Then he tore off a sheet and handed it to Vitalia. Glancing at the note, Vitalia nodded in satisfaction. She took out her wallet from her pocket and counted out the required amount of money. After handing the money to Nicolau, she started packing the items into the 2 baskets she had brought with her. After organizing the items, she bid Nicolau farewell and left in an efficient manner. As she caught up with Zoraida, the unpleasant Vitalia whispered, "Look, you brought that can for nothing today. There's no milk at all. You failed today, neighbor. I'm sorry." However, there was no trace of remorse in her voice. Vitalia was just glad that her neighbor would leave without the thing that she needed the most. Basilio was next in line at the table. He also began listing the items he intended to take. Nicolau wrote something in his notebook again, tore off a sheet, and handed it to Basilio. After paying, Basilio picked up his purchases and left. When it was Zoraida's turn, Nicolau stood up. He headed towards a small building a little way off. He went inside and came a few seconds later, carrying an iron can in his hand. Zoraida smiled, looking at her neighbor. When Nicolau approached her, he handed her the can. Zoraida gave him the one she was holding. "Thank you, Nicolau. I don't know what I would do without you. Thank you, dear, for looking out for me. I don't even know how to thank you." Nicolau waved his hand. Zoraida took a dozen eggs and a kilogram of meat. After paying Nicolau, she bid him farewell and left. She was smiling while walking home. A newborn grandson was waiting for her at home. Unfortunately, Zoraida's daughter had lost her milk supply, and there was nothing to feed the boy. Zoraida tried buying milk from many people in the village, but only the milk from Nicolao's cow didn't cause allergies for the boy. It suited him. The boy eagerly latched onto the bottle. Nicolau knew about Zoraida's grandson, and even if he didn't sell milk, he always had a can ready for her and her grandson. Nicolau had been living in the village since he was 20. When he and his wife, Marta, arrived in the village, many looked at them askance. They had moved from the north, and they were city folk. No one believed that city people could fit in this small village, but everything turned out differently than many expected. Nicolau and Marta handled everything beautifully. They built a good house, then started a farm. They had chickens, goats, cows, and pigs. They tended to their own garden. Then they began selling meat, eggs, milk, vegetables, and fruits. Everything was so delicious and fresh that soon the entire village was buying from them, even though many had their own farms. Everyone tried to buy something from Nicolau and Marta at least once a week. Somehow, this couple always had better and tastier things than others. They lived their whole lives together without children. Many tried to find out why Marta never had a child. But the woman herself never talked about the reason for it, or why their family never became complete. Eventually, everyone got used to the fact that Nicolau and Marta lived by themselves. Nicolau and Marta were pleasant people. You could have serious conversations with them and have a good laugh. There were welcome guests in every house, and Marta loved hosting guests as well. For every holiday, she always had a table set. They never invited anyone, but whoever came to their house was a valued guest. So, it happened that during holidays, it was always crowded in their home, laughter and songs filled the air, everyone danced and enjoyed themselves, but then everything changed. It changed 15 years ago when Marta suddenly passed away. Her heart stopped unexpectedly. After her death, many speculated that the woman was simply heartbroken and couldn't bear not having a child, even though she never showed it. Almost every woman in the village believed that Marta considered herself damaged and incomplete, and it broke her heart. It was unclear why they thought this about her, as she never uttered a word about how it made her sad not to have children. Her death had an unpredictable effect on Nicolau. He never spoke to anyone again. At first, no one understood what was happening to him. After his wife's death, Nicolau hardly appeared in public for a few months. Nobody bothered him. Everyone thought he was trying to cope with grief in his own way. Neighbors saw him going to the garden, continuing to run the farm, but he avoided contact with everyone and didn't sell any products. Many thought he would waste away without his wife and would soon follow her, but it turned out differently. Exactly 3 months after Marta's death, Nicolau began selling his products again. He set up his table just like before, but now there was no sign of his wife next to him. Each product had a price tag next to it. People started coming again. They were relieved to see Nicolau coming to his senses, but they were surprised to find that he no longer talked to anyone. When someone asked him about something, he simply stared at the person without saying a word. People initially thought he had gone mad, but then realized he was of sound mind and memory. He just didn't speak to anyone. Then, women began to gossip that he was keeping silent due to his grief. Legends started appearing in the village. They were about Nicolau and his beloved wife Marta, about their love that had robbed him of his voice. Women sighed, sitting in front of their homes in the evenings, sharing stories about Nicolau and Marta. At first, many didn't know how to buy groceries from a man who didn't speak, but eventually, everyone got used to it. Nicolau would write a note to each person with the total amount they owed, and it was even more convenient this way. No one lingered at his place, wasting precious time on pointless conversations. They would come, greet, buy, thank, say goodbye, and leave. That was a perfect option for those who didn't like to waste time. For all those 15 years, Nicolau continued to run the farm, sell his products, and remain silent. He even started making butter and cottage cheese. It was a mystery to everyone how a man managed to do everything himself. Local gossip said that his wife had given him immortality, and now Nicolau didn't sleep at night but worked around the clock, tending to the farm. But all those were the ramblings of foolish women. Nicolau was simply a hard-working person. About 2 years ago, Zoraida suggested to Nicolau that her son should help him on the farm. Naturally, she couldn't discuss everything with Nicolau, so she just made the suggestion. Nicolau didn't hesitate for long. He simply nodded to Zoraida, and the next day, David came to Nicolau. The young man was diligent and understood Nicolau without words. Nicolau never had to explain things to him for a long time. A simple hand movement and a few signs, and David immediately understood what needed to be done. Nicolau was completely satisfied with this arrangement. He was content with David, even though he didn't show it, but David could sense it. And now, Zoraida also sensed it. Nicolau left a milk can for Zoraida. It was a precious gesture. This is how Nicolau lived, not speaking to anyone. And after all these years, everyone was convinced that his silence was his way of paying tribute to his beloved wife's death. Sophia shaded her eyes with her hand, squinted, and looked through the fence at the house where she and her children were about to live. "Mom, did you make a mistake? Is this really our new home?" Dorothea said. Sophia glanced briefly at her daughter and then looked at the house again. "No, I don't think so. We came to the right address. This is our new home," she said uncertainly. "What don't you like about it?" "To me, it's better to live here than in the city with Dad, who's always angry," Miguel said. "Miguel, stop it. I've asked you so many times, don't speak about your father like that," Sonia admonished. Miguel looked displeasedly at his mother and then stared at the house, crossing his arms over his chest. All three of them stood there for a little while longer, gazing at their new place to live. Then, Sophia lowered her hand from her face and let out a heavy sigh. She looked at her children and tried to encourage them. "Don't think that everything is so bad. In reality, we're quite fortunate. I don't know how it would have turned out if we had stayed in the city. I couldn't find a job at any school, and here the salary will be better, plus they've provided us with this house. Renting an apartment in the city is too expensive. A teacher's salary doesn't leave much room to spare, but here the utilities are cheaper and we'll have our own yard. We could even start some kind of small farm. And besides, we'll have a good life in the village. I've already found out. There's a river here, and the school is a good one, quite big. I'm sure the people here are nice," Sophia said. Dorothea smiled shyly, looking at her mother. Miguel, however, wasn't as cheerful. It was obvious from his gloomy expression that he wasn't entirely pleased with everything. But where else could he go? Staying in the city with a father who always did wonders was not an option. I still don't like it here. I bet there's no internet here either. How am I supposed to do anything without the internet? Miguel answered sullenly. Sophia sighed again. She needed to gather patience, not only for herself, but also for her children, to adjust to the new situation. It would require all her willpower. She couldn't let herself show weakness even once, as her children would pick it up. She had to be a model for them to follow. Miguel, I'm sure there's internet here. Just calm down. It's not so bad. I understand that in the city, we had more opportunities, entertainment, and everything else. But believe me, I couldn't let him continue that way. It was just the beginning. I didn't want to wait until he turned his anger towards you. You understand that, don't you? Miguel's expression immediately changed. He remembered how his father had raised his hand against their mother. He would give a lot to be older and stronger. Then he could have protected his mom. He realized his mom was right when she left him. The kids had long noticed that their father showed aggression not only towards their mother, but also towards them, although he mostly vented his anger on their mother. Miguel studied with a boy whose father used to hit him severely. The family seemed prosperous. His father and mother regularly paid school fees, attended meetings. No one would have guessed that they had problems at home. Only Miguel knew that not everything was right in that family, and he didn't want his family to end up the same way, which could have happened if they had stayed with their father. No, Mom. I don't want to live with Dad. I want to live with you in this village. Sophia smiled slightly. Then she hugged her daughter and ruffled her son's hair with her left hand. That's good. That's wonderful, my dears. You're the most precious thing I have in this world. I won't let anyone hurt you. Now, let's go inside our new home. Our belongings will arrive in about an hour. We can explore the place for now. Ready to go? Dorothea and Miguel nodded. Sophia opened the gate and entered the yard. The children hurried to follow her. Sophia didn't notice that one person was attentively observing her. It was Nicolau. The silent old man heard conversations about how the new primary school teacher had finally arrived in their village. It was a stroke of luck for the school. They hadn't been able to find a teacher for 2 years. The primary class teacher, Laura Fernandez, was stretched between 2 classes. It was tough for her, but she held on to hopes that a new teacher would come soon. Nicolau frowned as he watched the woman and her children. It so happened that the new teacher had been assigned the house right next to his. This woman was his neighbor. Nicolau wasn't pleased with this. He was accustomed to having no one around, and now this woman and her children had appeared. What if her children were noisy? They'd be making noise and shouting late at night, disturbing his peace. He wasn't enticed by such a situation. After standing for a few more minutes, Nicolau opened his own gate and entered his yard. He decided he would tackle problems as they came. Perhaps things wouldn't be as bad as he thought. The entire day, Sophia unpacked their belongings. Her children were helping her. The interior of the house was quite nice, and the furniture was old but decent. Miguel and Dorothea immediately claimed their rooms and started settling in. On Sunday, Sophia continued arranging things. She tried to cheer herself up, hoping that her future wouldn't be as dreadful as she feared. The following day, Sophia went to school. It was the end of August. She had to discuss everything with the principal and get to know the other teachers. She would need to organize a parent meeting soon. She had to find out which class she'd be teaching, the number of students, and their names. Her impression of the principal remained uncertain after their first meeting, and she hoped today's meeting would clarify things. She genuinely hoped the principal would turn out to be a decent person. After meeting with the principal, Sophia connected with another primary school teacher. She liked this woman immediately. She was very cheerful and talkative. Thank goodness. You can't even imagine how long we've been searching for a primary school teacher. It's like everyone disappeared. I was at my wit's end. It's so tough to handle two classes at once. We had to put some students on the second shift. It was terribly inconvenient for me, for the children, and for their parents. Your arrival has revived me. Now we'll have just one shift. I won't be working from morning until night. By the way, my name is Laura Fernandez. Sophia smiled sincerely. Nice to meet you, Laura. I'm Sophia Dies. I see we're roughly the same age. I already like you, Sophia, Laura responded with a smile, shaking her hand. Sophia smiled back. The initial contact was established. Sophia was confident that she and Laura would become friends. After sorting everything out at the school, Sophia returned home. Her children were busy in their rooms. Sophia quickly prepared lunch, fed the children, and did the dishes. The children went back to their rooms right away, and Sophia went to the yard with a cup of coffee. It was about to darken. Sophia savored the rural air. How wonderful it was here. It couldn't be compared to the city. Yes, the city was vibrant, full of opportunities and conveniences, but it also had noise, hustle, dirty air, and pain. That's where she started to wither, and her husband, Samuel, was to blame for it. He didn't give her a peaceful life. Lately, he has always been dissatisfied with something. Sophia was sure he had some problems, but he wouldn't admit to anything. He just unleashed his anger on her. She couldn't bear it anymore. Who knows what could have happened if she hadn't decided to move? Sophia was sitting on the porch, lost in thought. Her mind was wandering far away. She felt so sad that she couldn't hold back her tears. She held a cup in her hand, and tears fell directly into the coffee. She cried loudly for a few minutes. Her life had changed so abruptly. She loved her husband, but she couldn't continue living with him. He had crossed the line, and she didn't want to subject her children to an unhealthy family environment. Why is all of this happening to me? She said aloud, gradually calming down. She had almost stopped crying and fallen silent when she heard a sound. Sophia jolted and looked around. She saw a gray-haired man standing on the other side of the fence to her right. The man was holding a long stick in his hand. Sophia quickly realized what he was doing. On his side of the yard, there was a small apple tree. Apparently, the man was knocking apples down with the stick to gather them later. She thought he would continue with his task, but he was staring at her intently and didn't move. That's when Sophia realized she was being impolite. After all, she had a new neighbor now. She had moved here, and she had to follow the village's customs. Sophia believed that in the village, everyone should know each other, be friends, and respect one another. She intended to do what she thought was right. She decided to introduce herself to her neighbor. Sophia wiped her face with her hand, placed the cup on the porch, stood up, and walked over to the fence. She smiled warmly and said loudly, "Hello. I'm your new neighbor. My name is Sophia." Strangely, she expected the man to smile back and introduce himself, then they would exchange a few casual, non-binding phrases, and then go back to their houses. In principle, that would have been the kind of introduction that would have suited her. But things didn't go as she thought. The elderly man continued to stare at her intently. He didn't make a sound. What's more, not a single muscle on his face twitched. It was as if he hadn't heard her at all. "Can you hear me? My name is Sophia. I will be a primary school teacher at the school. We will be neighbors now. What's your name?" she asked. But the man remained silent again. Sophia might have thought something was wrong with him, he was that odd. But then she saw him nod. For some reason, Sophia immediately understood that it was a kind of greeting. Apparently, he simply didn't want to talk to her. Well, she wasn't fortunate she had an unsociable neighbor. Sophia's smile faded slightly. If he didn't want to share his name, that was his right. She had to introduce herself, and he could choose whether to respond or not. It was his personal matter. "Well, it was nice to meet you. Take care." See you around, Sophia said, turning to leave. Then she heard a sound. She turned back towards the man. The old man was tapping the fence with his stick. When she looked at him, he pointed the stick at the ground. Sophia glanced down. There were about a dozen apples lying there. They weren't spoiled. They were fresh apples, just knocked down by the elderly man. Do you want me to gather the apples? Sophia asked. The man nodded, and then he passed the iron container through the fence to her. Sophia took it. It was already halfway filled with apples. She smiled slightly, squatted down, and began gathering the fallen apples into the container. In a minute, the task was done. Sophia extended the container back to the old man, but to her surprise, he didn't take it. He shook his head, then pointed his index finger in her direction. What? Sophia asked in confusion. The old man sighed. His brows furrowed. Then he pointed his index finger at the apple container. Making sure that the neighbor followed his gaze, he gestured towards Sophia, and that's when she understood what he meant. For me? Do you want me to take the apples? Sophia asked in surprise. The elderly man nodded. You gathered apples for me? He nodded again, still looking stern. Oh, how nice. Thank you so much. I have 2 children, Dorothea and Miguel. They really love apples, especially homegrown ones. You can't buy such things in the city. I'm really grateful to you. Maybe I should pay for them? Sophia said. The man shook his head and made a hand gesture, indicating that he didn't need money. Then, Sophia did something that deeply surprised her neighbor. She lifted the container and pressed it against her chest. Thank you. You know, tomorrow I will bake an apple pie. I will definitely treat you. You mustn't refuse. I won't accept a refusal. Well, I should go, it's getting late. Good night. Saying this, she smiled and headed towards the house, holding the apple-filled container to her chest. Nicolau watched her until she disappeared inside. He stood there for a few more minutes. He wasn't planning to accept the apples as a treat. He had different plans. Knowing that the woman had 2 children, he decided they might end up stealing apples from his tree, so he preemptively picked the fruits from the branches. He intended to retrieve each of the fallen apples using the stick over the fence. But when he heard the woman crying, he felt something long forgotten stir within him. It was a pity. What could have happened to this young woman who cried for so long? She came alone with her children. Nicolau didn't see any men with her. Most likely, her difficult life situation was somehow connected to her family life. Perhaps her husband had passed away. Perhaps they were divorced. Or maybe something else. Maybe she was a single mother. He didn't want to be overly concerned about it, so he shook his head and headed back to his house. She would treat him to an apple pie tomorrow. When she mentioned that, Nicolau hadn't planned on taking any treats from her, but now he found himself looking forward to their next encounter, as he suddenly wanted to taste her pie. The next day, Sophia went to visit her neighbor. She brought an empty container and a whole apple pie. The pie tasted amazing. Nicolau hadn't eaten anything like it in a long time, and within a day, he brought her pears. She tried to offer him money for them again, but he declined. And that's how they started communicating. He would give her something, and in return, she would treat him to some homemade food. They quickly found common ground. One time, Nicolau invited her to have coffee with him. Naturally, he didn't speak, but Sophia chatted away. She told him about her life, how she left her husband, how her husband was very wealthy and used to be nice, but had changed dramatically, and living with him had become unbearable. Many people told Sophia that she was a foolish woman, that she should have endured her husband's antics for the sake of his wealth, and that her children would grow up in prosperity. However, Sophia had a different opinion. She believed that no amount of wealth in the world was worth suffering for. She made a choice, and that's why she became a village teacher and moved here with her children. Nicolau was listening attentively to his neighbor. Sometimes he nodded, sometimes he gestured, but he didn't speak a word. From the very beginning, Sophia understood that the man was deaf-mute. She knew nothing about him, but in his eyes, she saw kindness, despite his perpetual frown. She saw that he treated her well. When Nicolau ensured that Sophia's children behaved properly, didn't shout or make noise in the yard, he calmed down completely. His life continued as usual, undisturbed. Additionally, he now had a pleasant neighbor who always treated him to something delicious. Nicolau started giving her eggs, milk, vegetables, and fruits, and he never accepted any money. Initially, Sophia felt very uncomfortable, but she kept cooking for him, treating him to tasty things, and he never declined. Sophia came to see this as an honest exchange. Time passed, and a new school year began. Sophia got to know the students and their parents. She liked her class a lot and was eager to start working. Her new friend Laura kept her company and shared stories about rural life, customs, and traditions. After a month, Sophia felt like she knew almost everything about every villager through Laura's tales. Of course, she hadn't met every villager yet, but based on Laura's descriptions, it felt like she already knew everyone. Sophia had started to relax. She enjoyed living in the village, and her children were calm as well. But then an event occurred that frightened her deeply. Her husband didn't know where Sophia had gone with the children. She hadn't told any of her friends to prevent him from finding out, but he still managed to locate her. In late September, he arrived at her home on a Saturday in his expensive car. When Samuel stepped out of the car, Sophia froze. She was in the yard when his car pulled up. As soon as he emerged from the vehicle, her face went pale. He squinted, gazing at her. Seeing his malicious gaze, Sophia knew that trouble was about to come. Samuel opened the gate and entered the yard without any hesitation. He approached Sophia and crossed his arms over his chest. "Well, I found you, my dear. Did you think you could hide from me? How wrong you were. It's impossible to hide from me. I'll find you, even if you're buried underground. I came here so that you could personally see that you'll always be within my sight. What do you want?" Sophia said without even saying hi to him. "What a strange question. You know what I want, for you to come back home. Enough of these foolish games. You've had your fun, now let's go. Where are the children? Are they here or roaming around this village?" Samuel said sternly. Sophia tried to compose herself. She sighed and calmly replied to him. "We're not going anywhere. We live here now. I work at the school, and you won't be able to force me." Samuel squinted. Sophia felt a chill run down her spine when she saw that look. It didn't promise anything good. "Do you think you've forgotten who's the head of the home?" Samuel answered threateningly. "Well, this isn't your home, and you can't be the head here. I'm the one here, and only I decide whether to stay or go back. You came here for nothing. Go back to the city. You don't belong here." Samuel was dumbfounded by such audacity. His wife had never spoken to him like that before. It was unexpected and unpleasant. He took a step forward, his fists clenched, but he caught himself just in time, realizing he wasn't at home. He glanced around, confirming that no one was there, and then took another step closer. "You're acting foolishly, but I'll forgive you if you come back. I'm asking you one last time, will you pack your things?" Sophia swallowed nervously. She had to see this through, even though she was scared as he gradually approached her. She didn't allow herself to back down even a step. She remained in the exact same spot where she had been standing. She looked directly into his eyes and calmly responded, "I won't come back, Samuel." Her husband pursed his lips and took a deep breath. Sophia sensed he was teetering on the edge. For some reason, she thought he might attack her. She believed he might knock her down and start kicking her, even though he had never done that before. She held her breath for a few seconds, expecting this to happen, but it didn't. "I was willing to forget everything that happened if you came back." I was ready to overlook your inappropriate behavior. I gave you one last chance. You missed it. Soon enough, you'll crawl back to me on your knees. You'll return, and I'll decide whether to take you back or not. Then you'll regret not doing it now. Just watch. It'll all happen exactly as I promise." Saying this, he turned around and swiftly headed towards his car. Sophia was left gaping in astonishment. She had expected his refusal to drive him crazy and for him to lose control. But watching him leave, she breathed out in relief. Could she really stand her ground? Hadn't he punished her for defying him? She had succeeded. She had truly changed. Now she could stand up for herself. Now she could protect her children. Now she was an independent individual who answered to no one. Wasn't that wonderful? Samuel left. When Dorothea and Miguel returned, Sophia didn't say anything to them. She decided not to tell them that their father had visited. Her children were so happy. They had made friends among the village kids. They smiled, had fun, and focused on the positive. The sudden arrival of their father could only shatter the newly formed idol. She didn't want to destroy what she had created. It was better that they didn't know he had come. It was better that they thought he didn't know where they were. Dorothea's nightmares at night were the last thing she needed. She didn't want Miguel to revert to his previous state of bitterness from the city. Her children had become normal again. At that moment, Sophia didn't realize that her husband's visit could contribute to the destruction of her almost peaceful life. She believed that all the bad things were behind her and that her refusal had made Samuel realize she was no longer his toy. Sophia couldn't anticipate that Samuel's visit would mark the beginning of another dark period in her life. Exactly 7 days later, on the first Saturday of October, Sophia took her children to the forest. She wanted to pick mushrooms and simply go for a walk. They were gone for about 4 hours. When they returned to the village, they were met with horrifying news. Sophia and the children hadn't even reached their street when they saw Laura rushing towards them. Laura was waving her arms and shouting something, but from a distance, Sophia couldn't make out the words. When Laura came closer, Sophia heard, "Sophia, a terrible tragedy happened. Your house is on fire. It's a nightmare, some kind of horror. They've been trying to put out the fire for hours. Where were you? We were so afraid you were in the house. It's awful. Half the village is there. They called the firefighters, but there was an accident on the bridge. They can't get to us. Thank God you're all alive. I was so scared that you were in the house. It's horrible." Well, Sophia couldn't even think this could happen. Their house was completely burned down. They managed to extinguish the fire. It didn't spread to other residents, but their home was completely destroyed. Sophia gazed in horror at the smoldering remains of their dwelling. Dorothea and Miguel clung to each other in fear. They were so shocked that none of them even cried. How could this have happened? No one could have predicted it. All the neighbors were milling around Sophia and her children. Everyone was saying something, but Sophia couldn't make out a single word. She stared at the ruins in horror, not knowing what to do next. Many neighbors started bringing out clothes, food, and other items from their homes. Laura also stayed close by. She was trying to console Sophia. "Don't be devastated. The most important thing is that you're alive. We'll make sure you get a new home. The most important thing is that you weren't there. Everything else can be rebuilt. People are good here. Everyone will help you. You won't be alone. We'll come up with something." Laura's gentle voice snapped Sophia out of her stupor. Suddenly, she felt so cold and alone. She hugged her children tightly and began to look around. Looking at the people around her with fear, she couldn't even recognize them. Tears welled up in her eyes. Then she turned to Laura and whispered softly, "The new home will burn down too." "What? What did you say?" Laura asked, puzzled. "The new home will burn down too." "It's inevitable," repeated Sophia. Laura thought that Sophia had lost her sanity due to grief. She started patting her friend on the shoulder. "Come on, calm down. Why are you thinking about bad things? There's no need to dwell on the negative. Everything will be okay. Why would you think that the new house would also burn down?" "Because I know who did it, and he'll do it again," Sophia whispered barely audibly. Laura widened her eyes in surprise. "What? Who did it? How do you know?" she whispered back. Sophia glanced at her children. She leaned down, kissed them, and left them standing there, walking a few steps away with Laura. When they were a bit away from the children, Sophia took Laura's hand and, looking into her eyes, whispered, "My husband did it. Maybe not him personally, but he organized it. I'm sure of it. He came a week ago. He threatened me to come back, but I refused, and he said that I would be forced to return on my own, that I would crawl back to him on my knees. He said he would do anything to make it happen, and that I would regret refusing him. So, I'm certain he did this. Maybe he had someone watch us, and most likely, he knew no one was home. Can't you see? It's a warning. He's declared war on me, and I'll have to surrender because I have no other choice. I'm afraid for my children's lives. I never could have imagined he was capable of this, and I'm terrified of what he might do to my children." Laura was in shock. "Oh my God. You've mentioned that you had problems with him, but I didn't think it was to this extent. I can't believe he could do something like this. You have kids, they could have been hurt." No, I don't believe that. No person is capable of that." Sophia shook her head slightly and looked towards the burned house. "You just don't know him, Laura. If you knew him like I do, then you'd understand what I'm saying." Laura wanted to say something but found no words. She sighed and hugged her friend. "We'll help you. Don't worry, we'll help you. You shouldn't go back to such a person. I won't allow it. I won't let you go anywhere. You'll stay here and continue teaching. We'll come up with something. We'll protect you. You won't be able to. He's too rich and powerful. He won't tolerate anyone standing in his way or hindering his goals. He'll try to get me back by any means necessary, and he'll keep doing it until I return. I can't put all of you in danger. But there will be danger if I stay in this village. I need to disappear, leave. If not to him, then somewhere else. But the thing is, I have nothing left, no money, no belongings. All right, stop it. You're not going anywhere. You have children. Don't forget about them. You're staying here, and everyone will help you. Calm down, everything will be all right." By evening, there was hustle and bustle around the burned house. People were running back and forth. Some were trying to invite Sophia to spend the night at their homes. Someone offered to take the children, but the children clung to Sophia in fear. They didn't want to leave their mother. Nicolau was standing off to the side, watching all the commotion. When the fire started, his house was also in danger. He arrived in the midst of the blaze and helped extinguish it. He was afraid that Sophia and the children were in the house, and he knew that if they were there, they wouldn't have been able to escape because the fire was too strong. He breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that Sophia and the children were alive and unharmed. Throughout all this, he observed people bustling around the distressed woman. Then he approached closer. He overheard the local schoolteacher telling other villagers that Sophia's husband likely set the fire. This news spread faster than the wildfire in the village. Some condemned the poor teacher's husband. There were even those who said that her arrival had brought trouble to the village. Different things were said, but nevertheless, many tried to help her in some way. By evening, Nicolau realized that he needed to take matters into his own hands. Sophia and the children were still standing on the street. No one had even offered them chairs to sit on. Everyone was just carrying bags of belongings and groceries. All of this had formed a pile by the fence. Nicolau saw that Sophia was barely holding up. So, he walked up to her and gently touched her shoulder. Sophia turned around and saw her neighbor in front of her. And then, the stone wall she had built around her fragile heart crumbled. When she saw Nicolau, she felt such relief, as if she had seen her own father. Of all the villagers, this was the one Sophia felt kinship with. He couldn't speak, but she didn't need that. In his gaze, she saw what she had been missing so much. This person didn't utter empty words. He conveyed regret, sympathy, compassion, and support through his eyes. Sophia saw all of that. Sophia felt all of that. She knew she could trust this person. "Oh, Nicolau, I just can't," she mumbled, beginning to cry. When she sobbed loudly, Nicolau pulled her close and embraced her. Sophia leaned into him, burying her face in his shirt, and cried bitterly. For a few minutes, she was crying while Nicolau was stroking her back. Then he frowned, took her by the shoulders, and pulled back. He pointed a finger at her shoulder, then indicated her children, then pointed at his house and gave a slight nod of his head. Sophia understood him instantly. She stopped crying, wiped her tears with her hand, and nodded as well. "All right." Laura, who was standing nearby, observed the situation. She furrowed her brows. Laura couldn't comprehend what had just happened. In some inexplicable way, Sophia had communicated silently with her neighbor. No one else in the village could understand Nicolau like this, yet Sophia had managed to do so. David, Zoraida's son, was standing nearby. Nicolau waved to him, and David approached. Nicolau gestured towards the bags of belongings and groceries. David immediately understood Nicolau. He nodded and walked over to take a few bags. Nicolau also picked up some bags, and they walked together towards David's house. Laura quickly approached Sophia. "What's happening here? Why are they taking the bags? The villagers are trying to help you. I don't understand how you communicated with him. How do you understand him?" Sophia shrugged slightly. "I don't know. I understand, that's all. He offered me and the children to stay with him for a while. He sheltered me, Laura, do you understand? I'll stay with him until everything settles down. I'm so grateful to everyone for their help, to you, to all the villagers, and to Nicolau. I don't even know what I would have done without all of you. So many people are looking out for me. You all care so much about me and my children. I've never met anyone who treated me this way." Since then, Sophia, Dorothea, and Miguel lived with Nicolau. The ruins of the burned house remained on the neighboring plot. They couldn't provide Sophia with a new home immediately, but they assured her that everything would work out for the best. After a few days, Sophia started to recover. Laura had been substituting for her at school, but soon Sophia returned to work. However, not everything was as good as it seemed. Gossip started circulating around the village, and it revolved around Sophia and Nicolau. People whispered and judged Sophia. Generally, everyone considered her a good teacher, who set an example for her students and their parents, and for the other villagers too. But now, many looked at her differently. This woman had moved in with her elderly neighbors so easily. What prompted her to do that? She didn't even hesitate, and willingly agreed to live with him and her children, even though she had only lived here for about 2 months. How did she become so close with her neighbors so quickly? People also laughed at Nicolau. When people came to his place for groceries, they whispered behind his back. If Sophia happened to catch their eye during those moments, people looked at her with judgment in their eyes. Sophia realized that she was being judged for moving in with Nicolau, but she had nowhere else to go. No one offered her a place to stay. A new home wasn't provided for the teacher. Where else could she have gone? Sleep on the street? Since then, Sophia has tried her best not to be seen by the neighbors when they came to Nicolao's for shopping. And Nicolau paid no attention to the sideways glances he received. Several times, he overheard people talking behind his back, saying that he wanted to remember his youth. Look at him. He's old enough, and his beard is gray. But what was he doing? Forgot how old he is or what? What happened to his memory of Marta, his late wife? She was such an upstanding person, and he decided to have a young wife. And this woman? She calls herself a teacher in elementary school. What can she possibly teach the children? Will she be able to teach them anything worthwhile? She quickly moved in with the old man, as if that were all she had been waiting for. Of course, our highly respected Nicolau is well off. He's got plenty. And this smart Sophia decided to reach into his pockets and thought that she could do that much faster through the bedroom. I told you right away that she's a crafty woman. Can city folks be any different? She came here, set her rules, and quickly snatched up our Nicolau, Vitalia said. Many nodded and agreed. Every day, new rumors spread throughout the village, and each resident wanted to add their 2 cents, contributing new details about Nicolau and Sophia's personal lives. It even reached a point where 2 children from Sophia's class were transferred to Laura's class. Laura knew that parents were simply refusing to let Sophia be their children's teacher. But she didn't tell her friend. She heard all the gossip, but she didn't want to believe all the things people were saying. A month later, autumn break arrived. Sophia had a small vacation. She didn't even assign homework to the children for the break, and the happy kids played and enjoyed themselves during the autumn holidays. Sophia tried to gather her thoughts. She attempted to figure out what to do next, and that's when Samuel appeared again. Sophia saw him from the window of Nicolao's house. She covered her mouth with her hand when she saw Samuel surveying the ruins of the burned house. Then she noticed how he was looking with interest at Nicolao's house. He knows. He knows I'm here. No. He can't know. No, he knows. Someone must have told him, Sophia muttered, trembling with horror. Samuel paced in place for a few minutes, looking around, then headed towards his car. Sophia prayed for him to leave quickly, but suddenly Samuel stopped, seeing something interesting. And a minute later, Sophia understood what he had seen. Dorothea was playing in the yard, and she entered Samuel's line of sight. He noticed that his daughter was playing in the yard of someone else's house. Sophia saw Samuel's malicious smile and saw him stride towards the gate. No, no, not this. Sophia whispered and stepped towards the front door. But Nicolau emerged from another room. He grabbed her hand and shook his head. Slightly pushing her back, he looked at her sternly. Sophia understood that he had ordered her to stay home. He won't leave me alone. I need to go out and drive him away. I need to do something so that we won't be hurt again, Sophia said quietly. Dorothea, sweetie, where's Mom? Will you call her? Samuel shouted loudly, addressing his daughter. As soon as Dorothea saw her father, she backed away in fear and didn't say anything. That's when Samuel started shouting even louder. Sophia! Sophia, come out. I know you're here. You must come out right now and talk to me. I came here for you. You won't be able to avoid a conversation. I came to take you and the children with me. You won't get away from me that easily. If you don't come out right now, I'll tear everything apart here. Do you hear me? Come out peacefully, or you'll regret it. Do you hear? He knows I'm here. He won't just leave like that. I need to go out, Sophia said. Nicolau shook his head, then straightened his shoulders. And then Sophia saw a shotgun in his hands. No. Not this. You're not actually planning to, she began to say but couldn't finish. The corners of Nicolao's mouth twitched, and his eyes squinted slightly. Sophia understood him without words. Thank goodness. I was afraid you were planning to, Sophia couldn't finish her sentence. Nicolau snorted. Sophia understood that everything would be fine. She nodded at the old man. Then Nicolau took the shotgun and walked out of the house. As soon as Samuel saw the old man stepping out of the house, he folded his arms over his chest and laughed loudly. Is this your defender, Sophia? Quite the protector, I must say. And you hope he'll stop me? You won't succeed, old man. You'd better not stand in my way. My wife is in your house. My lawful wife, understand? We're not divorced yet. By law, I have the right to demand that she be with me, and you won't stop me. I want to see her right now. I'm going to come into your house and take my wife. Even if I have to drag her through the ground, I'll still do it. Samuel approached the gate and opened it, and then there was such a loud noise that Samuel covered his ears in fear. He looked at the old man, who was standing just a few steps away from him. In the old man's hands, he saw a shotgun. Nicolau fired into the air. He menacingly spread his legs and stood, holding the shotgun straight at Samuel. He didn't move, waiting to see what Samuel would do next. Samuel was aggressive, but he wasn't a fool. He understood without words that the old man was serious and that the next shot would be aimed right at him. Samuel extended his arms forward and raised them. Okay. I get it, I'm leaving. Just maybe you could lower the gun, old man? It's better if you lower the gun, or it'll get worse, Samuel said more calmly. But Nicolau didn't lower the gun. He continued pointing the gun at Sophia's husband. Samuel squinted and clenched his jaw with all his might. He reddened with anger, but he couldn't do anything. He was terribly furious. He began to back away slowly. The barrel of Nicolao's shotgun moved along with Samuel. Fine, I'm leaving. I really am leaving, but you'll regret this, old man. No one has ever dared to treat me like this, and nobody will get away with it. You'll regret this, remember. Then Samuel turned around and walked to his car. He got behind the wheel, and a minute later, the car disappeared from view. And only then did Nicolau lower the shotgun. He stared in the direction where Sophia's husband had left for about a minute, then he went back into the house. Sophia was standing near the sink. I don't even know what to say, she said. Nicolau shrugged. He left the kitchen to put away the shotgun. He returned a few minutes later. And what should I do next? Sophia asked him. Nicolau squinted, looking at the ceiling. Then he snorted and looked attentively at Sophia. Then Sophia closed her eyes and sighed. I understand. I need to continue living, working, taking care of my children, and believing that everything will be all right. Opening her eyes, she saw Nicolau nodding approvingly. Then he went about his business. A week passed. Sophia and the children were at school. Nicolau first worked in the kitchen, then went to the yard to attend to his chores. Sometimes he glanced out onto the street. Today was a strange day. It was too quiet, and no one was in sight, as if the whole village had vanished. This wasn't something that usually happened. Nicolau decided to peel potatoes for the evening. He brought out all the necessary items and sat facing the house, with his back to the street. He was deeply focused on cleaning the vegetables, so he didn't hear someone approaching from behind. Only when something hard and cold touched the back of his head did he startle. One more move, and you're a dead man, he heard a male voice say. At first, he didn't recognize who it was. The man was speaking very quietly and calmly. Nicolau was sitting still, not moving. He waited to see what would happen next. He immediately understood that it was the gun that was pressed against the back of his head. In his youth, he often hunted in the woods, so he was familiar with various weapons. He had both a shotgun and a revolver in his house. You will now calmly turn towards me, and don't play like a fool. I warned you. Nicolau carefully placed the knife and the unpeeled potato on a stool. He slowly turned towards the stranger. It wasn't a stranger. It was Samuel. He had returned, not alone, but with the gun. When Nicolau turned to face Samuel, the man pressed the pistol against his forehead. Well, now we've switched roles. You thought you could get away with what you did to me last time? No, it won't work. Do you understand me? You're silent all the time. Not a word. What's wrong with you? Have you swallowed your tongue or just can't talk? Are you in your mind or have you gone mad? Samuel sneered. Nicolaus silently looked at his uninvited guest. His gaze remained calm. Samuel couldn't understand why the old man was behaving this way. He thought things would be different. This slightly threw him off, but he wasn't going to give up without a fight. He was furious that, once again, he couldn't achieve what he desired. Sophia hadn't returned home. This old man had come between them. Everything was going wrong, as Samuel wanted, and it infuriated him. Today, he had come to set things right, and he was sure that this time he would emerge victorious from this battle. He stepped one step away from Nicolaus. He gestured to him with the gun. Get up. We should go now. And don't you dare do anything foolish. I've got nothing left to lose. I'm not afraid of you. If you take even one step aside, I'll shoot. Not into the air, but into you. Got it, old man? Strangely, Nicolaus nodded in response. Samuel was surprised, but he didn't show it. Now we're going outside and heading to my car. I'll walk alongside you. But don't worry, the gun will be pressed against your back. If you behave quietly and calmly, nothing will happen to you. We'll get in the car and go to a certain place. I'll repeat, no foolishness, or it'll be worse. You wouldn't want Sophia to be in danger, right? True? Samuel was even more surprised when the old man nodded again. He led him to his car. Within minutes, Nicolaus was already sitting in the front passenger seat. Samuel got behind the wheel. He still held the pistol in his right hand. Directing it at the old man, he used his left hand to take handcuffs out of his pocket and toss them onto Nicolaus' lap. Here, put them on. Nicolaus was slightly surprised. It was evident as he raised his eyebrows. However, he complied with Samuel's request. Within a few seconds, the handcuffs were on his wrists. Great. Once we get to the location, I'll undo them. Behave quietly, don't even think about outsmarting me, or I'll shoot, and that'll be the end of you. Did you get it, old man? Once again, Nicolaus nodded. Then he turned away and stared at the road. Samuel squinted, observing the elderly man for a while, trying to discern his thoughts. Then he shifted the gun to his left hand while still aiming it at Nicolaus, and he started the car. They drove for only 15 minutes. Nicolaus immediately understood that Samuel was taking him into the woods. Samuel stopped at the edge of the forest, undid Nicolaus' handcuffs, and then said, Now get out of the car and don't even think about running. I'm younger and faster than you. Nicolaus stepped out of the car and stood in place. Samuel exited the car and pointed the gun towards the forest. Go ahead. I'm right behind you. Nicolaus proceeded forward. They walked for about 10 minutes. Nicolaus knew that there was a swamp deep in the forest, so he tried to veer off the path all the time. However, he got the feeling that Samuel also knew about the swamp and was purposefully leading him there. Get back on this path. No need to turn, said Samuel. And the old man obediently continued ahead. Soon, they reached an area that was different from where they had started. After a while, Nicolaus' legs began to sink into the soft ground. They reached the swamp. Nicolaus stopped. He frowned because he knew it was dangerous to go further. What are you scared of? You've lived here your whole life, haven't you? You know every nook and cranny. Can't you keep going? Or did you chicken out? Samuel jeered. Nicolaus cautiously moved forward, carefully examining the ground under his feet. Samuel followed closely. Soon, worry appeared in Nicolaus' gaze, and he stopped again. Why do I have to keep pushing you all the time? Are you an idiot? Not only do you stay silent all the time, but you can't even follow orders. You're getting on my nerves so much. Nicolaus took a step toward Samuel, raising his right hand as a warning. Samuel didn't expect his captive to move towards him, so he stepped back, losing his balance. This happened so suddenly that his right hand opened, and the gun fell from it. Samuel fell backward, landing on his buttocks. Immediately, he felt his hands getting stuck in the muddy sludge. Looking around, he realized he was in a quagmire. With each passing second, he sank deeper into it. He started moving frantically, trying to get out, but with each passing second, his hands and legs sank deeper and deeper. What's happening? I can't get out of this. I need to. I can't pull my hand out. Where's my gun? What the hell? I don't understand anything. What's going on? Samuel shouted, looking around for solid ground. Nicolau stared with wide eyes at the man who was helplessly struggling in front of him. He didn't move at all because he knew it was dangerous. Samuel finally realized that the more he moved, the faster he sank. He froze and then looked helplessly at the old man. Help! Please, help me! I can't get out. I need your help. Please, I'm begging you, he said. But Nicolau didn't rush to help him. For a few seconds, he stared at Samuel, and then, carefully surveying the ground beneath his feet, he walked away. No. You can't leave me. You can't do this. I know you're kind. You're protecting Sophia. You can't let me die. I'm sinking. Sophia will never forgive you if she finds out you didn't help me, and she'll hate you. Please, help me, don't leave me. I'm sorry I brought you here. I didn't intend to kill you. I just wanted to scare you. Don't go, I'm begging you. Samuel cried helplessly. But the old man gradually moved away, and after a few minutes, Samuel was left all alone. He felt himself slowly sinking into the mire. Realizing he was entirely on his own and that no one would help him, Samuel began to think about what he could do, but nothing came to mind. After half an hour, Samuel realized with horror that he would likely die here. No one knew he was there, except this old man, but he wouldn't help him because Samuel had treated him horribly. Samuel understood that this was the end. He had caused so much pain to his loved ones, went over the heads of the others, and only now realized what a huge mistake it was. He had hurt his wife deeply, the woman he loved with all his heart. He had been so helpless that he lashed out at her, and she endured his cruel behavior in submission. Eventually, she left him, and Samuel couldn't bear it. He seemed to have lost his mind. He desperately wanted his wife back. He wanted to kneel before her, apologize, beg for forgiveness, and ask her to come back. But instead, he had threatened her. He had warned her that she would regret her actions, but in reality, Samuel only regretted how he had treated her. If he could explain everything to her and turn back time, he would have tried to control himself and explain everything to his wife. But time had slipped through his fingers. He would die soon. Sophia would never see him again. He would never confess to her what had caused him to change so drastically. He was so afraid of disappointing her that he even tried to make her suffer, and she suffered, but it never made Samuel feel any better. After an hour and a half, Samuel realized he had stopped sinking in the swamp. He had the feeling that his backside had hit something solid. It was as if he had sat down on something. He was submerged in the mire up to his chest. Yes, he had stopped sinking, but it didn't make him feel any better. He knew his death would be even more terrifying now. He would simply stay here, with his body sinking from his shoulders, remaining on the surface of the mire. Nightfall would soon arrive, and some creatures would come and consume him alive. It would be even more horrifying than simply drowning. What an horror it was! Yes, he deserved this fate for everything he had done. In his thoughts, Samuel begged his wife for forgiveness, realizing that she would never forgive him and would never know the true reasons for his behavior. Well, he deserved it. This was the fate that should befall someone who had tormented his loved ones so cruelly. Another half hour passed, and Samuel heard a rustling sound. A twig snapped. Samuel felt himself trembling. Perhaps some creature was approaching him, ready to grab him by the head, bite him, and devour him. The end was near. Samuel understood that. He closed his eyes, trying to relax. He needed to meet death with dignity. However, what dignity could there be in such a horrifying situation? Samuel continued to keep his eyes closed when he heard the sound of a twig snapping again, only this time closer. His heart started pounding harder. He tried to focus on his breathing to calm his racing heart, but he couldn't. When he heard a rustling sound right beside him, he couldn't hold back and said, "Oh Lord, let it happen as quickly as possible." "Well, where's the rush? You're getting ahead of yourself. It'll take about an hour for me to pull you out. You're a fool. How could anyone marry you if you're so clueless? You're such a mess. How did Sophia ever end up with you? What's your name? Is it Samuel, right? I've dealt with so many like you. For more than 15 years, I kept silent, didn't want to talk to anyone, and I was perfectly fine with that. Many understood me without words, and I didn't have to engage in meaningless conversations, asking people how they were or how things were going. I didn't need that at all. I was happy. And then you showed up. Oh boy, I must say, you're something. You even made me talk. I don't know what Sophia saw in you, and I don't even want to know. I'm convinced you're not worthy of her, but I see the pain in her eyes. She may fear you, but she still loves you. And you, idiot, lost such a woman. I don't know what could have happened that made you act this way. Did you really think I'm a monster, that I'm capable of leaving a person in trouble, letting them die such a foolish death? You're an even bigger fool than I could have imagined. I deliberately took so long to come back to make you think about your behavior and to get your mind straight. Yes, it's dangerous here, but it's not very deep. It's nearly impossible to drown in this place, but one still die here. A person can't escape this mire alone, so if anyone goes into the swamp, it's only with someone else. If anything happens, someone else can always help you get out. I waited until you got stuck enough to make sure you wouldn't suffocate, and now I'm going to rescue you, you foolish twit. I don't have the right to decide who lives and who dies. That's up to the Lord, Nicolau said. Samuel looked humbly at the elderly man. He had thought this old man was a fool, but it turned out he was wiser than many people Samuel knew. Has it finally dawned on you what you wanted to say? Did you understand something, or are you going to threaten me again? Of course, I'm ready to strangle you for setting that fire. Your wife and children could have died, Nicolau said sternly. Samuel looked at the rope that the elderly man held in his hands. He realized that the old man had come back to save him. He looked into Nicolao's eyes. Yes, I understand. I truly didn't intend to kill you. I just wanted to scare you so that you wouldn't come between me and Sophia anymore. And I didn't start a fire. I'm not crazy. Nicolau grinned. You didn't? Well, I'll believe you, but you're still a fool, Samuel. You ended up standing between the two of you. Nicolau freed Samuel. It took only 15 minutes. Samuel didn't know how to thank him, but Nicolau waved it off. I don't need your gratitude. Just go back to where you came from. Get in your car and leave. I'm begging you, don't tell Sophia anything. I want to make things right. I want to change everything. Now things will be different. Just don't tell her about what I've done. She already thinks I'm a monster. Nicolau headed back home on foot to the village, and Samuel opened the trunk of his car. He had a sportswear outfit inside. He changed his clothes. He left the dirty ones on the ground. Samuel got behind the wheel and sat there for a few minutes without moving. Then, he burst into tears. After 10 minutes, he calmed down and drove away into the city. Of course, Nicolau didn't tell Sophia anything. He didn't want to frighten or upset her. He continued to keep his silence. For 15 years, he had spoken only to Samuel, and he didn't intend to talk to others. Autumn came to an end, then winter passed, and spring began. Sophia continued to live with Nicolau. All the villagers had accepted it. They understood that Sophia wasn't Nicolao's wife. Everyone realized that Nicolau treated her like a daughter. Even the annoying Vitalia no longer spreaded silly rumors. Sophia helped Nicolau with household chores and worked at the school. By the way, the two students who had transferred to another class returned to Sophia's in the spring, and their parents even apologized to the teacher for thinking ill of her. Sophia didn't hold a grudge against anyone. She was happy that things had worked out for her. But most of all, Sophia was happy that her husband no longer bothered her. However, she missed him greatly. Over time, all the bad things between them gradually faded. Sophia understood that she still loved Samuel, but she was afraid to return to him. And was there even any sense in it? Perhaps Samuel would never forgive her for Nicolau confronting him with a gun. Maybe they were already divorced, and Sophia just didn't know about it. But in spring, one event set everything right. Suddenly, a rumor spread through the village that the plot of land where Sophia had lived when she first arrived in the village, and where the house had burned down, had been bought by someone. 2 weeks after this rumor, workers arrived. They began clearing the space from the burned remains of the house. Soon, workers started building a new house. Everyone speculated and guessed who might have bought the house in the village, but none of the villagers admitted to the purchase. In early May, everyone finally learned who the new owner of the plot was. It was Samuel, Sophia's husband. When Sophia saw him on the plot for the first time, she was horrified, but she immediately saw that Samuel had changed. He looked at his wife completely differently. He nodded to her in greeting. Sophia didn't even respond with gestures. When she realized that Samuel had bought the plot of land, she was stunned. Samuel visited the land every day. He wore work clothes and, alongside other workers, participated in the construction of the house, assisting each of them. Sophia had never seen her husband like this before, and the children too. They were all amazed. After some time, the children began to interact with their father. Dorothea and Miguel were happy. Both of them told their mom that their dad had changed. Sophia didn't quite believe it. Memories of how he had threatened her, trying to force her to return to the city, were still bright. Nicolau saw Samuel, but he didn't react to his presence. Samuel always greeted Nicolau when he saw him. Eventually, Nicolau even started nodding back at him. This was the highest degree of friendliness towards Samuel, and Samuel appreciated it. Samuel understood that he couldn't talk to Sophia now. He realized the terrible things he had done. All those horrible things he had done were due to one reason: Samuel had almost lost his business. His partner had set him up. Samuel had tried his best to seek justice, but after the incident in the swamp, he understood that he would not only ruin his own life, but also the lives of his wife and children. So, he sold a part of his business. With that money, he bought this plot in the village and started building. He intended to settle here because he wanted to win back his wife and children. He understood that he shouldn't approach Sophia now. He'd only scare her away. Everything needed to follow its course. She needed to start trusting him again. Only then could he ask for her forgiveness. Sophia and Samuel had just gotten married, and they dreamed of having their own house. They often fantasized about what it would look like. By the end of the summer, when the house was nearly finished and Samuel began to work on landscaping the garden, Sophia realized that every detail was dedicated to her. She knew it by that beautiful flower bed. Sophia had dreamt of having such a flower bed in her house. The pathway leading to the house was made of brown geometric tiles. Exactly the kind of path Sophia had wanted. It would remind her of her childhood. Next to the house, Samuel had set up a beautiful gazebo, which had a swing, 4 chairs, and a small table. A hanging chair with a green throw was also there. Green throws covered the chairs and the swing. It was Sophia's favorite color. Seeing how her husband occasionally looked at her, Sophia understood that he was mentally trying to ask for her forgiveness, but he was afraid to approach her. But this time, he wanted her to choose the right time. Sophia had to decide if she would allow him to come closer or not. And he would never force her to do anything against her will again. She sensed that her husband wanted to convey exactly this, and he would wait until she made up her mind. He would look at her every day, trying to guess what she was thinking. And he would never approach her unless she wanted him to. Sophia stood by the fence, watching Samuel tend to the far corner of the garden. She was close to tears. "What am I to do with you? You're driving me crazy. How can I trust you again? After all, I'm afraid, and you're the one who started the fire," she whispered aloud. A minute later, she heard an unfamiliar voice behind her. "I can swear it wasn't him who started the fire. And don't be afraid, if you don't try, you'll never know if things could work out for you or not. And if you bravely approach him, you'll be certain that you made the right choice. But as for me, he doesn't seem so bad. We all make mistakes, sometimes very harsh and cruel ones, but if we want to, we can forgive everything. No one will judge you for your decision. You just have to realize if you need it or not. I've been observing him for a long time, and you too, and sometimes I feel like sparks fly between you. Think about it, daughter." That was Nicolau who was speaking. Sophia was astonished. You can speak? And you've been silent all this time? How is that possible?" she asked the old man in amazement. "Yes, my dear, I've been silent for 15 years, and I intended to stay silent until the very end. It was your husband who made me speak. I won't even tell you the circumstances under which it happened. It was a long time ago. I hold no grudge against him. But I believe your husband is trying to prove that he loves you. And in your eyes, I see how desperately you want to give him another chance," Nicolau said, placing his hand on Sophia's shoulder. Tears shimmered in Sophia's eyes. The corners of her mouth trembled slightly. She asked softly, "Do you really think I can hope for the best?" Nicolau sighed and replied, "We all can hope. We have the right to that. Hope dies last. Without hope, a person is more dead than alive. So, yes, I believe you can hope. Thank you. Thank you for everything. I will never forget this. And you will always be like family to me, Nicolau. And you've become to me a daughter that I've never had." Everything ended well. Sophia and Samuel had a serious talk. It took them several weeks to explain everything to each other, to listen, and to forgive. And then Sophia and the children moved into their new home, a house that Samuel had been involved in building. Nicolau was a welcome guest at Samuel's house. Initially, the men were wary of each other, but over time, they even became friends. Samuel often sought advice from Nicolau on various matters. All the villagers were shocked when they heard that Nicolau could speak. Some continued to believe that it was a miraculous recovery and that Sophia had a hand in it. However, some noticed that after meeting Sophia, Nicolau had become an entirely different person. And Zoraida believed that his love for the village teacher, who had become his daughter, had healed the old man's soul.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.